As night fell, Callista stood at the foot of Mount Olympus, her heart steady but her mind alert. The air around her shimmered, and she found herself in a vast, open plain under a clear night sky. The stars twinkled above her, but the ground beneath her feet seemed strange, almost fluid. She realized that the plain was not what it seemed. This was a realm of illusions, where nothing could be taken at face value. Suddenly the ground shifted, and before her appeared a massive labyrinth, its walls towering high into the sky. The entrance loomed before her, dark and foreboding. Callista knew that she would have to navigate this labyrinth to find her way to the heart of the trial. But she also knew that the labyrinth was not just a physical challenge, it was a test of her mind, her ability to see through deception and find the truth. Taking a deep breath, Callista stepped into the labyrinth. The walls seemed to close in around her, and the air grew thick with tension. As she walked, the path twisted and turned, each corner leading her deeper into the maze. She knew that the labyrinth was designed to confuse and mislead, to trap her in a web of falsehoods. As she ventured further, Callista encountered illusions that sought to deceive her. At one turn, she saw Lysander standing at the end of a corridor, his arms outstretched as if waiting for her. Her heart leaped and she rushed forward, only for the image to dissolve into mist as she approached. She realized that the labyrinth was trying to prey on her deepest desires, using them to lead her astray. Callista paused, closing her eyes and centering herself. She could not afford to be distracted by illusions. She had to rely on her instincts, on the love that had brought her this far. Athena, she whispered, grant me the wisdom to see through these deceptions. Help me find the true path. Opening her eyes, Callista continued through the labyrinth, but now she was more cautious. When she encountered another illusion, this time a vision of her home, with Lysander standing in the doorway, smiling warmly, she hesitated. Instead of rushing forward, she studied the vision, searching for the inconsistencies that would reveal it as a falsehood. Sure enough, she noticed that the shadow cast by Lysander's figure was wrong, the angle unnatural. She knew it was another trick and turned away from it, continuing down the path. As she moved deeper into the labyrinth, the illusions became more sophisticated, blending reality with fantasy in ways that made it difficult to distinguish between the two. Callista encountered versions of herself, each one offering different paths, each claiming to be the true Callista. But she ignored them, trusting in her own heart to guide her. The labyrinth twisted and turned, but Callista remained focused. She knew that the only way to succeed was to stay true to herself and her purpose. Finally, after what felt like hours of navigating the maze, she reached the center. There, standing tall and regal, was Athena herself. The goddess was as imposing as Callista had imagined, with eyes that seemed to pierce through the soul. Athena studied her for a moment, then nodded in approval. You have done well, Callista, she said, her voice both commanding and kind. You have seen through the illusions and remained true to your purpose. You have proven that wisdom is not just about knowledge, but about understanding the heart. Callista bowed deeply, humbled by the goddess's words. Thank you, Athena, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. I have only come this far because of my love for Lysander. Athena smiled, and for a moment, Callista felt a warmth that banished the chill of the labyrinth. Your love is strong, and it has guided you well. You have passed this trial, and with it you are one step closer to your goal. Go now and rest. Tomorrow will bring your final challenge. With that, the labyrinth dissolved, and Callista found herself back at the foot of Mount Olympus. The night was peaceful, the sky clear and full of stars. Callista felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had faced Athena's challenge and emerged victorious. But she also knew that the final trial lay ahead, and it would be the most difficult of all. With the wisdom gained from Athena, Callista felt ready for whatever was to come. She lay down to rest, her mind and body prepared for the ultimate test that awaited her on the 10th and final night. The morning of the 10th day dawned with an air of solemnity. Callista knew that this was the day she had been working toward, the final trial that would determine whether she could save Lysander. Each of the previous nights had tested her in ways she could never have imagined, but tonight's challenge would be the ultimate test of her love, courage, and strength. As the sun rose high over Mount Olympus, Callista spent the day in quiet reflection. She thought of Lysander, of their life together, and of the future she hoped they could share. The trials had been grueling, but her love for him had carried her through each one. She knew that tonight, more than ever, she would need to draw on that love to succeed. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky began to darken, Callista made her way to the foot of the mountain one last time. The air was thick with anticipation, and the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the final trial to begin. Callista took a deep breath, calming her racing heart, and prepared herself for whatever lay ahead. The sky above her suddenly darkened as clouds gathered, and a rumble of thunder echoed across the land. Callista knew that this was the beginning of the trial, and she steeled herself for what was to come. A bright flash of lightning split the sky, and in its light she saw the gods and goddesses appearing before her, their forms towering and majestic. Zeus stood at the forefront, his gaze piercing, while Hera, Poseidon, Athena, and the others formed a circle around her. Callista, Zeus's voice boomed, resonating with power, you have faced many challenges, and you have proven yourself worthy. But this final trial will test all that you are. Tonight you will dance not for one god, but for all of us. Callista's heart pounded in her chest, but she nodded, ready to face whatever challenge they set before her. She began her dance, moving gracefully as she had each night before, but she knew that this time would be different. The gods watched her intently, their eyes following her every move. As she danced, the ground beneath her feet began to tremble, and the air around her crackled with energy. Suddenly the gods began to transform, each taking on a different form. Zeus's figure grew larger, his form becoming a towering storm cloud that crackled with lightning. Hera's form shifted into a great peacock with feathers that shimmered in the dim light. Poseidon became a massive wave, crashing and churning as if the sea itself had come to life. Callista continued to dance, her movements flowing seamlessly from one step to the next, even as the gods transformed around her. She realized that this trial was a test of her ability to adapt, to continue her dance no matter what obstacles were placed in her path. But the gods were not done yet. The ground beneath her suddenly split open, and from the chasm emerged flames, swirling and roaring as Hephaestus, the god of fire and forge, took his place in the circle. Callista could feel the heat on her skin, but she kept moving, her dance becoming more intense as she faced the flames. Next, she felt a cold wind sweep over her as Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, transformed into a great wolf, her eyes glowing in the dark. Callista's heart raced as the wolf stalked around her, but she didn't falter. She danced with even more fervor, her movements reflecting the rhythm of the wild. Apollo, the god of the sun and music, then appeared as a brilliant golden light, blinding in its intensity. Callista shielded her eyes but continued to dance, her body moving in harmony with the light, as if the music of Apollo's lyre guided her steps. The gods continued to shift and change, each one presenting a new challenge, but Callista met them all with grace and determination. She danced through the winds of Hermes, who appeared as a swift gust, challenging her balance. She moved in perfect rhythm with Demeter, who caused the earth to sprout vines and flowers around her, trying to ensnare her feet. She matched the strength of Ares, who appeared as a fierce warrior, his presence intimidating but not enough to break her resolve. As the night wore on, Callista could feel her strength waning. The trials had taken their toll and she was exhausted. But she knew she could not stop. Lysander's life depended on her completing this final dance. She called upon every ounce of strength she had left, pushing herself beyond her limits. Finally, she reached the climax of her dance, her body and spirit fully immersed in the movement. The gods, in their transformed states, began to merge their powers, creating a swirling vortex of energy that surrounded Callista. The wind roared, the earth shook, the flames blazed, and the light of Apollo shone brighter than ever. It was as if the very elements of the world were converging around her. Callista danced with everything she had, her heart pounding, her breaths coming in ragged gasps. She could feel the eyes of the gods on her, watching, judging, but she did not waver. Her love for Lysander was her anchor, grounding her even as the world around her seemed to dissolve into chaos. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the storm of energy around her ceased. The gods returned to their original forms, their expressions inscrutable. The silence was deafening, and Callista stood still, her body trembling with exhaustion, waiting for their judgment. Zeus stepped forward, his expression softened. "Callista," he said, his voice gentle now, "you have faced your final trial with courage, grace, and unwavering love. You have danced not just for us, but for Lysander, and it is that love that has carried you through each challenge. You have proven yourself worthy." As Zeus spoke, the other gods and goddesses nodded in agreement. Callista felt a wave of relief wash over her, tears welling up in her eyes. She had done it. She had completed the trials. "Lysander's life shall be restored," Zeus declared, his voice echoing through the night. "The love you have shown has moved us all, and we grant you both our blessing." With those words, a soft glow surrounded Callista, filling her with warmth and peace. She knew that the gods had fulfilled their promise. Lysander would be saved. Callista fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she offered her heartfelt thanks to the gods. The weight of the trials lifted from her shoulders, and she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude and joy. The love that had driven her to dance each night had proven strong enough to overcome even the greatest challenges. The gods slowly began to fade from view, their forms dissolving into the night sky. The air grew still once more, and the stars above twinkled brightly as if celebrating her victory. Callista remained on her knees for a moment longer, basking in the peace that had settled over her. When she finally rose, she felt a deep sense of calm and fulfillment. The journey had been long and difficult, but she had done it. She had saved Lysander. With a heart full of hope and love, Callista began her journey back to the village. The trials of the 10 nights were behind her, but the lessons she had learned would stay with her forever. She knew now that love was the most powerful force in the world, capable of overcoming even the greatest challenges. When Callista arrived at the village, the first rays of dawn were breaking over the horizon. She hurried to the small cottage where Lysander lay, her heart pounding with anticipation. As she entered the room, she saw him stir, his eyes slowly opening. "Lysander," she whispered, rushing to his side. He looked up at her, a smile spreading across his face. "Callista," he murmured, his voice filled with warmth and love. "You came back." She nodded, tears of joy streaming down her face. I did. And you're going to be all right. The gods have blessed us." Lysander reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Thank you," he whispered, his eyes filled with gratitude. Callista leaned down, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I would have done anything for you, Lysander." "I love you." "I love you too," he replied, his voice full of emotion. And so, as the morning sun rose over the village, Callista and Lysander held each other, their hearts filled with love and hope for the future. The trials of the 10 nights were behind them, but the strength of their love would carry them forward, guiding them through whatever challenges life might bring. The days that followed were filled with a sense of renewal and joy. Lysander's health continued to improve, and soon he was able to stand, walk, and eventually regain his strength. The villagers who had watched over him while Callista was away were astounded by his recovery. Whispers of the gods' intervention spread quickly, and the story of Callista's dance became a legend that would be told for generations. As Lysander grew stronger, he and Callista would often sit together, reflecting on the trials she had faced. Callista shared with him every detail: the spirits of the dead, the illusions of predators, the fierce winds, and the final trial before the gods themselves. Lysander listened with awe, his love for her deepening with each tale. One afternoon, as they sat by the edge of the village, overlooking the fields that stretched out toward Mount Olympus, Lysander turned to Callista, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You saved my life, Callista," he said, his voice soft but filled with emotion. "I don't know how I can ever repay you for what you've done." Callista smiled, her heart swelling with love for him. "You don't need to repay me, Lysander. I did it because I love you. That's all the reason I needed." Lysander took her hand in his, holding it gently. "You are the strongest, most courageous person I know. The trials you faced, I can't even begin to imagine the strength it took to overcome them." Callista squeezed his hand, her gaze softening. "It wasn't just my strength, Lysander. It was our love. That's what gave me the courage to keep going, even when things seemed impossible." Lysander smiled, pulling her closer. "Our love is stronger than anything. I'm so grateful to the gods for giving us a second chance." As they sat together, the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was a peaceful, quiet moment, one that they both cherished. The trials were behind them now, and the future lay ahead, full of possibilities. But the experience had changed them both. They had faced death and the unknown, and they had come out stronger for it. They knew now that no matter what challenges might come their way, they could face them together, with love as their guiding light. Word of Lysander's miraculous recovery spread quickly through the village, and soon the villagers decided that a celebration was in order. They wanted to honor Callista and Lysander, and to give thanks to the gods for their blessing. Preparations began immediately, with everyone pitching in to make the event as grand as possible. On the day of the celebration, the village square was filled with music, laughter, and the smell of delicious food. Brightly colored banners fluttered in the breeze, and children ran about, playing games and chasing each other with joyous abandon. Callista and Lysander were the guests of honor, and as they arrived in the square, they were greeted with cheers and applause. The villagers had decorated a special table for them, adorned with flowers and offerings to the gods. As the sun set and the festivities continued, the village elder, a wise and respected woman, stood up to address the crowd. She called for silence, and the villagers quickly quieted down, eager to hear what she had to say. "Today we gather to celebrate a miracle," the elder began, her voice carrying across the square. "We celebrate the love and courage of Callista, who faced the trials of the gods to save the life of her beloved Lysander. And we give thanks to the gods for hearing her prayers and granting their blessing." The villagers cheered, and the elder smiled, waiting for the noise to die down before continuing. Callista's journey was not an easy one. She faced great challenges and dangers, but she never gave up. She showed us all the true power of love, and for that we honor her today. The elder then turned to Callista and Lysander, her expression softening. "You have both been through much, but your love has carried you through. May the gods continue to watch over you and bless your lives together." The villagers cheered again, and this time Callista and Lysander stood to acknowledge the crowd. Callista felt a deep sense of gratitude and pride as she looked out at the faces of her friends and neighbors. She had never sought recognition or praise, but knowing that her actions had touched so many people filled her with warmth. Lysander took her hand and they both bowed to the crowd, a gesture of thanks and humility. The villagers responded with more applause, and the celebration continued late into the night, with dancing, singing, and feasting under the stars. As the evening drew to a close, Callista and Lysander found a quiet spot away from the festivities where they could be alone. They sat together, watching the flickering lights of the village and listening to the distant sounds of laughter and music. "This has been an incredible journey," Lysander said softly, his arm around Callista's shoulders. "I'm so grateful to be here with you, to have a future to look forward to." Callista leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling content and at peace. "We've been given a second chance, Lysander. I want to make the most of it, to live every day with love and gratitude." Lysander nodded, his heart full of love for the woman who had saved his life. "We will, Callista. We'll live our lives with the same courage and love that brought us through the trials. And no matter what comes, we'll face it together." Callista smiled, knowing that they had been through the worst and had come out stronger on the other side. The trials had tested them, but they had also shown them the depth of their love and the strength of their bond. As they sat together, the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, signaling the start of a new day. It was a new beginning for them both, a chance to build a life filled with love, joy, and the promise of a future together. And so, hand in hand, Callista and Lysander watched the sunrise, ready to face whatever the future might hold, knowing that their love would carry them through anything. The story of Callista's dance at the foot of Mount Olympus quickly spread beyond their village. Travelers and traders who passed through heard the tale and carried it with them to distant lands. Soon, the legend of Callista and Lysander became known far and wide, a story of love, courage, and the favor of the gods. In the years that followed, many people from all over Greece would come to the village, seeking to hear the story firsthand from those who had witnessed it. The villagers were always happy to share the tale, and Callista and Lysander often found themselves surrounded by eager listeners, all wanting to hear about the trials she had faced and the love that had saved Lysander's life. Children especially loved hearing the story, and it became a popular bedtime tale for parents to tell their children. It was a story that inspired hope, teaching that love could overcome even the greatest challenges and that the gods rewarded those who showed courage and devotion. As Callista and Lysander grew older, they remained beloved figures in the village. They lived a simple, happy life, content in each other's company. They never took for granted the second chance they had been given, and they made the most of every day, filling their lives with love, laughter, and gratitude. One day, many years after the trials, a group of travelers arrived in the village, carrying with them a gift for Callista. It was a beautifully crafted statue carved from the finest marble, depicting Callista in the midst of her dance. The statue showed her with her arms raised, her expression one of determination and grace, and around her were the symbols of the gods who had watched over her during the trials. The travelers explained that the statue had been commissioned by a distant king who had heard the story of Callista's dance and had been so moved by it that he wanted to honor her. The statue was to be placed in the center of the village as a reminder of the power of love and the favor of the gods. The villagers gathered to witness the unveiling of the statue, and there was a sense of reverence and awe as it was revealed. Callista and Lysander stood at the front of the crowd, their hearts filled with emotion as they gazed upon the statue. "It's beautiful," Callista whispered, her eyes shining with tears. "I never imagined that our story would reach so far." Lysander nodded, his arm around her shoulders. You inspired so many people, Callista. Your courage and love have touched more lives than you'll ever know." The statue was placed in the center of the village, where it stood as a symbol of hope and strength for generations to come. It became a place where people would come to offer prayers, seeking guidance from the gods, or simply drawing inspiration from the story of Callista and Lysander. As the years passed, the village itself became known as a place of pilgrimage for those seeking blessings from the gods. People would come from far and wide to see the statue, to hear the story, and to leave offerings in the hope that the gods might show them the same favor they had shown Callista and Lysander. And so the legacy of Callista's dance lived on, not just in the village, but throughout Greece. It became a timeless tale, a reminder that love, when paired with courage, could overcome even the most daunting of challenges. It was a story that brought people together, uniting them in the belief that the gods watched over those who showed true devotion and bravery. Long after Callista and Lysander had passed on, their story continued to be told, a cherished legend that was passed down from generation to generation. The statue of Callista remained in the center of the village, a silent guardian that watched over the people and their descendants. One day, many years later, a young girl named Talia came to the village with her family. She had heard the story of Callista's dance from her mother and had begged to see the statue for herself. When they arrived, Talia was awestruck by the sight of the statue, its beauty and grace capturing her imagination. Talia stood before the statue, her heart filled with wonder. She could almost feel the presence of the gods, the same gods who had watched over Callista during her trials. She closed her eyes and imagined herself in Callista's place, dancing under the watchful eyes of the gods, facing challenges with courage and love. And then, in that quiet moment, Talia made a promise to herself. She would live her life with the same courage and love that Callista had shown. She would face her own challenges with determination, knowing that the gods were watching over her, just as they had watched over Callista. As Talia opened her eyes, she looked up at the statue, her heart filled with a sense of purpose. She knew that the dance would never truly end. The spirit of Callista's courage and love lived on, not just in the statue, but in the hearts of all who heard her story. And so, with a heart full of hope and determination, Talia turned away from the statue and returned to her family, ready to begin her own journey, knowing that she, too, could dance through whatever trials life might bring. And thus, the legend of Callista's dance continued to inspire, a timeless story of love, courage, and the favor of the gods, a story that would never be forgotten.